Всем добрый день, я рад вас приветствовать на нашем YouTube-канале Talab Talks. Как известно, Казахстан взял на себя обязательство к 2060 году достичь так называемой углеродной нейтральности, то есть выбрасывать углерода гораздо меньше, нежели чем мы его секвестируем. Это невероятно сложная задача, принимая внимание, что Казахстан входит в одну из наиболее передовых стран в негативном смысле с точки зрения выбросов СО2 и в целом загрязнения. И сегодня у нас в гостях два замечательных известных международных эксперта по вопросам экономики и изменения климата. Я с удовольствием представляю МАЙКЛа ОБЕРШТАЙНЕРа, директора Центра по изменению климата университета Оксфорд, и господина ПРАДИП МОНГА, заместителя исполнительного секретаря Организации Объединенных Наций по противодействию опустыниванию. So, please welcome to Kazakhstan. Thank you for that you had time and you are spending your efforts on bringing Kazakhstan closer to the commitments to reduce CO2 emissions. Хочу сказать, что сегодня, 31 октября, коллеги презентуют доклад, который они выпустили специально по Казахстану, и который называется «Карбоновое земледелие в Казахстане. Раскрывая возможности», в котором исследуется потенциал секвестрации углерода через так называемое карбоновое земледелие. И согласно выводам, Казахстан имеет достаточно большие возможности для использования именно этого способа, помимо в целом сокращения выбросов СО2. И я уверен, что об этом широкая аудитория не так хорошо осведомлена. So congratulations with this discussion paper. Could you please explain to our audience what is carbon farming and why carbon farming is relevant for Kazakhstan?
Okay, so carbon farming is a term and a concept that was developed quite many years ago, and it basically summarizes everything that can be done in the agricultural sector in order to bring greenhouse gases down. And the most important and the most promising is actually taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and sequestering it in agricultural soils. However, carbon farming overall can be viewed as an even broader concept, all the way going into the area of the bioeconomy, where you not only marry up agricultural production, but you also go into new industries like pharmaceutical industry, chemical industry, because the carbon atom can be either coming from fossil sources and produce goods and materials, but also can come from biological sources and do the same job. So here, carbon farming, there's a narrow definition, really agricultural production and being climate friendly. And the broader discussion is really becoming a broader sector of the economy overall.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Pradip Monga, so you are one of the authors of the discussion paper. So what is the main takeaways you can highlight for us?
Let me add to what Michael has already mentioned very clearly, that carbon sequestration, eco-restoration and land degradation neutrality are building blocks of carbon farming. In fact, broader terms of carbon farming is not only to capture carbon from the air, but also give huge social, economic and ecosystem services benefits to the local communities. I give you one example. For example, in Kazakhstan, 57 million hectares of lands are degraded lands. And as per UNCCD, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, every 10 hectares restored can create 2 jobs. So imagine out of 57 million, even if we just do 20% of that, which is around 11 million, we are creating 2 million plus jobs.
2 million jobs.
2 million jobs directly in the, not only in the farming sector, but also in the supply chains. And these jobs can create enormous benefit. Second, croplands as of now net emitters of 32 million carbon equivalent. That's what our report says very clear. But through carbon farming, croplands will become carbon sink. So it means there'll be huge carbon benefits there coming to that. And third, most importantly, is when you eco-restore these lands, abundant lands, through regenerative agriculture practices, you double the income. In fact, scientific studies show it can be up to 5 times $1 invested in regenerative agriculture through carbon farming can generate up to $5. Even if we take a conservative figures, farmers' income in those areas will become almost double if we really go to sustainable land development practices as well as land degradation neutrality. And this report brings out it very clearly.
How is perceived carbon farming all over the world? Do we have successful stories or promising stories?
Yeah. So there are many geographies that take carbon farming in the narrow sense quite serious. I'm coming from Europe, so European Commission is quite active in this, mostly through the existing lines of subsidization and really changing the subsidies, making subsidies less oriented towards production, but really emphasizing these ecosystem services like carbon sequestration. There are currently roadmaps being developed on bringing carbon farming into the CO2 trading scheme. That's ongoing. But this is also then related to the international negotiations. But when we look at other geographies, Latin America is quite active on this. I personally work quite a lot in Brazil, for example, and Argentina. They have very ambitious programs on they call it more nature-based solutions, but it's more or less the same thing. And where they also bring in both changing existing agricultural support policies and at the same time connecting to international market. It's very similarly organized. And you have in Brazil, for example, it's called the ABC plan. Where you have a number of different practices. There it's less about soil carbon sequestration, it's more bringing trees into agroecological production systems. So, you have trees and then you have, let's say, a pasture underneath because the sunshine is so strong. So you have all of these benefits. But then when you look at the African continent, also there are quite big programs at the moment being developed. Some of the delivery is not that great, but if I can single out one country, Nigeria, for example, has started with pilot projects and so forth. But as you go around the world, also last week I've been to China. Also China is very ambitious. For China, I think it's also very strongly related to what you brought into the equation. It's the rural development plans, the rural employment, livelihood enhancement measures, which can be combined with these carbon farming tools. So here you see everywhere initiatives popping up. Many of them have a longer history. Some of them are really frontier and quite aggressive.
Can you roughly estimate how large is the territory under carbon farming?
That's it's.
And which country is the leader?
Probably in terms of overall hectares, I think it's actually probably Brazil, which has where you can really earmark it. And there we are talking about 20 million hectares or so. Yeah. You can say so. But of course, there's still a lot to be done. And the intensity of what you can do in addition is still quite enormous.
And do you have estimate of the amount of the carbon sequestrated via carbon farming?
In Brazil, this is quite interesting because there you work mostly with an intensification of the agro production systems in order to spare land for the forests. So here you actually work indirectly. You try to increase production in the existing areas with more sustainability criteria. In order not to expand into the forest. So here the big carbon benefit is actually the avoided deforestation. And this is in the order of 500 million of CO2 per
And
year.
how is sustainable and attractive economic model of the carbon farming?
Well, they have a very traditionally a very strong financial system to support farmers in Brazil, mostly on the industrial farming side. But they also have a very strong social program. It's called Bolsa Familia, where you basically, as a farmer, get a fixed income. And then on performance, you get paid more. So there are these traditional money lines that go from the government. But currently, in terms of carbon farming, there's co-finance from Norway, $1 billion, and $500 million from the government of Germany. That comes in addition to what Brazil does.
Let's talk about Kazakhstan and your report, Carbon
Yes.
Farming in Kazakhstan, Unlocking the Opportunity. So what is the main takeaways for Kazakhstan?
Well, the main takeaway is Kazakhstan is such a big country, and it has not exploited its carbon farming possibilities yet. And if you just, even a small fraction of carbon absorbed on a unit land area, if you multiply this with many hectares, then all in a sudden you get into very big numbers. And so our study shows that the carbon farming potential is actually really quite enormous. So this is not only in order to achieve the own climate targets for Kazakhstan, but also there is a potential for participating in voluntary carbon markets. So very similar to the Brazilian case in a way. You have internal support schemes to benefit for yourself, to get you to your own targets, but you might also get international participation. And given that Kazakhstan is becoming such a energy superpower and also a minerals and metal superpower, there's a lot of opportunity to marry up these larger industrial perspectives with a carbon perspective that basically gives restoration to many of the ecosystems, increase the carbon sequestration capacity, and thereby participating in the international climate arena in a very positive and forthcoming way. Again, meeting the own targets, but then also trying to participate in international cooperation through carbon trading. And maybe, which doesn't come out too strongly, is, as we discussed already, I think there's huge benefits on the social side, internally, and there are so many ecological co-benefits on the biodiversity side, on the pollution side, on water saving and water management, which are giving a real perspective as a development perspective to the country.
And did you estimate any figures which is unlock the Kazakhstani potential in carbon farming? Like
we have them.
Income,
we will
figures.
present them.
Yeah.
I can tell you already
Yes,
now,
please.
but maybe we keep the secret. No, it's about what did we estimate? 32 million tons of CO2 per year, which would offset the current emissions from agriculture, because currently agriculture is emitting quite a lot.
And how much it's in money? 32 million.
Well, this is also, so nowadays you would conservatively multiply it by 10. In the carbon, we know that the carbon markets will have to be in the range of the excess of $100 per ton. So if you multiply these 32 million by 100, then you have the number, which is quite significant. In particular, if this money really goes into the less developed, poorer areas of the country, to the rural areas, this might actually be quite transformative for the farming communities in this country.
So it's more than 3 billion.
3.2 billion.
Yeah.
Of the additional export.
Yeah.
That's the market as of now.
It's 3 times higher than Kazakhstan receives on export of agriculture products.
Yeah.
You said it.
Okay. And what is the potential area you see in Kazakhstan for carbon farming, for restoration?
Well, you know, we have these 54 million hectares of degraded land. You know, this is kind of the hotspots where you look at the beginning. In principle, carbon farming and soil carbon sequestration always goes together with productivity increases. So if you can increase the productivity of the ecosystem, it can be both a production ecosystem, you know, a wheat field, and you produce, you increase productivity, or a natural grassland, or even a managed grassland, you will see more carbon in the soil. So what we really need to do is we need to go the next step. We did some kind of rough estimates, and we know approximately which ecosystems would deliver and biomes would deliver some of these things. But it's always the devil lies in the detail. You need to do more precise analysis, and therefore we're proposing a roadmap in order to really study more reliably where the big potentials are. And they are kind of, you know, geospatially, we need to locate them. But then we also need to see what kind of practices are really done at the moment and how can we transfer them to such that they are more restorative and actually more carbon absorbing. So here there's a lot of technical details still to be done, but the orders of magnitude will still stay the same.
Okay. Friends, may I ask you to look to the carbon farming in Kazakhstan potential, not only from academic point of view or policy making point of view, but from the point of view of the farmers, of the companies, of the people. So can you explain to our audience what is the ordinary farmer or entrepreneur could do and use these opportunities you are highlighting in this report? Mm-hmm. What is the way for the individuals, for entrepreneurs towards the carbon farming?
Yeah, and let me add, I think what Michael already mentioned, carbon farming connects the dots. It brings agriculture with water productivity, you're talking about livelihood options, food security, and of course all other ecosystem benefits coming with that. So first thing for farmers, it's very clear that through sustainable land management and regenerative agriculture practices, we double the income of farmers. So that is almost, there are a lot of scientific study done, but yes, it has to be local specific, which will really come out with more discussions. So we can double the incomes. There will be a lot of other benefits coming out, whether it is agrarian society, whether it's a milk production, whether it is supply chains industries. Of course, industrial base becomes very important, where instead of fossil fuel, we are using that, and farmers get income of that. And more importantly, we have a lot of soil organic carbon, we got it stock, and there will be value to that also. And UNCCD and many agencies are working around the world, how to compensate farmers for that. For that, we have to work out methodologies and verification ways, because we are talking croplands through agriculture, but this is the organic soil carbon, which is also farmers protect by using organic farming practices as part of carbon farming. So these are direct and indirect benefits. And I feel, one very importantly, a lot of unlocking private sector finance in these areas. Because when we talk about carbon markets, and especially Article 6.4 under Paris Agreement, which allow private sector here to really exploit those carbon credits and then sell to the regional countries or to any country in the world, other companies. So these are the things which I feel farming community, especially women and others, will really get empowered through carbon farming practices and approaches what we are proposing under the project.
Last time you was in Astana, and some of the farmers, they saw your speech, and it was very inspired in Pavlodar district, and they told that we are ready to give 15,000 hectares to the carbon polygon. Mm-hmm. So let's imagine that the farmer with 1,000, 3,000 hectares, they are ready to contribute this land to the carbon farming. So what should be the practical step for them to go towards all these benefits you are?
Okay. Well, this probably will also a little bit answer your question on the entrepreneurs. So since this is a new market, so to say, you also have new people coming in. So you, for example, we need to have independent monitoring and verification company. Typically, that's a remote sensing company that takes satellite images and analyzes satellite images to verify that the practice change the farmer embarked on is actually really happening. We have additional sensors which we can put on satellites, or we put them into the ground to actually measure the changes of carbon. So your farmer will have to have discussions with these people, and they probably will have to have either it's an international company or it's a local company that does those kind of things.
How to find these people? How to find these people? So I'm a farmer with 1 hectare.
Yeah. So you can, if we have companies I know of in Europe, but also in Russia and in other places that do this on a regular basis. And there the advantage would be that you have kind of a global consistency. They do projects in Latin America, in China, everywhere. So here you know what you buy, so to say. If it's a local startup company, graduates from the university, then probably the government has to, at the beginning, help them a little bit to get jump started.
First step is to find and get consultancy services.
Exactly. There you get consultancy services where you make sure whatever you think, either you know already how to do it, or you also need consultancy services on what to do best. But typically, when you are a farmer, if you can increase your yields, you reduce your tillage regime, you do precision fertilization and so forth, an array of things, then for sure you go into the right direction. But typically I would first talk to an agricultural extension agent, probably to someone who is an expert or a consultant working for a fertilizer company, for the tractor company. They have already quite a lot of knowledge. If you need a specialized consultant, perfect. If you're if you are an agronomic engineer, you look a little bit in the literature and you will find out what's best for you locally.
Okay, let's imagine that this farmer, he already found the consultancy, and they understand how much to invest and what kind of the culture they're going to crop there. How long it takes to verification that this global market or volunteer market is
okay. So here you can
believe that this amount of carbon sequestrated.
So typically how it works is you first work with default values, it's called. So basically you change your practice from intensive tillage to reduced tillage. Then we know from scientific literature how much carbon sequestration you would get. So you work with an off-taker of your carbon credit and say, this is in the first 1 or 2 years we're working with this value that's published, and we both we establish such a contract. The further you go along in time, you actually you gather data from on the ground, and then you can really credit for the amount that was sequestered on your location. So it's a stepwise approach.
How long it takes until the first money coming from the sequestration?
This depends on which kind of contract you have. But if you have a company like Microsoft, for example, Microsoft is one of these companies who don't only want to go for net zero, but they also want to undo their historical sins, so that their historical emissions. So they have arrangements with farmers, for example, to pre-finance it as well. So you basically, in the first year, you are already in the business. In other cases, you have a project developer that actually carries the financial risk and then contracts farmers for the activities. Then farmers just get paid. Or the farmer is the entrepreneur and takes the financial risk and takes a credit out. Most likely also cross-subsidized, and starts to develop. So there are many different ways on how to do this.
Impression that it's quite sophisticated projects. with many stakeholders, and it's not, the market is not so developed.
Well, what you ideally do there is you have a few pilot projects, which are probably at the
Carbon
beginning.
polygons.
Exactly, carbon polygons, where also the government steps in to help farmers to learn how to do this. It's subsidized at the beginning, but it's subsidized for learning exactly about these things. And once you have demonstrated it, and you know the biological numbers, the financial numbers, and it's has a perspective, then other farmers can much easier come into it. So you work with these polygons, with these pilot projects.
And how long these carbon polygons should exist until the sufficient amount of data they collect?
I think everything between 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years.
Yeah. That's realistic.
In fact, let me add, I think what Michael was trying to say, that we are talking about carbon farming ecosystem coming up here. Right smart policies at the national level, then unlocking public-private partnership at the local level, and with the monitoring, verification, the baseline. And we have seen in many countries now, including India, that a similar practice is agroforestry, where you have agriculture plus forestry there. And their carbon cooperatives have given lease for 30 years with Microsoft or Amazon or any national companies, where they provide upfront money right from first year, second year onwards. But you have to put those systems in place, where independent verification in place, and then government must allow that private sector to use those carbon credits as a market instruments. But farmers in the process, they don't have to wait 5 years or 10 years. For a first or second year itself, they start getting some incomes. And those income goes up and become steady with the time, if we can showcase that carbon capture and storage, what we call part of the circular bioeconomy, is there, carbon sequestration and certification, then it becomes very viable, win-win for everyone. Win-win for farmers, which is a main, like people are there, but also then linking to, you can say, other activities coming in there, including industrial. But here, another thing, dimension is very important to understand, is there can be global finance from Global Environment Facility, Global Climate Fund, which can really help in capacity building and putting these pilots in place, this carbon polygon in place. And that can help really to have the scaling up opportunities later on. Because seeing is believing. When farmers start seeing in their neighborhood this thing is happening, successful, farmers getting benefit, and government also puts right policies in place, then almost entire country gets galvanized. And this can be scaling up to all 57 million, which is degraded, but also the cropland itself. So both will go hand in hand.
Okay, so it looks like it doesn't work like bottom top. We need ecosystem, top bottom, kind of the support of the government, of international agencies, institutions.
Right.
Correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's why we're inviting today the Minister of Ecology, and I'm full of hopes that they will pay enough attention and understand these opportunities of Kazakhstan. So many thank you for your contribution.
We do believe that Kazakhstan will become carbon farming powerhouse for the region.
And by the way, what do you think? Because one of the ideas was emerged during the discussion inside the country of these opportunities. We have Aral Sea, it's one of the most famous ecological tragedy. So with this shrinking Aral Sea. Yeah. And Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, they're putting lots of efforts and money to kind of stop the desertification of this area. So can we make it like a carbon polygon?
In fact, I think so. Michael will give a very detailed presentation on this report, but initially northern part of Kazakhstan and Aral Sea perimeters of that, we feel that can be priority area to start with carbon polygon on the degraded lands. But other places, we can use even the existing croplands for whatever we're talking about carbon.
The second most famous degraded area is in Semipalatinsk nuclear test polygon. So it's quite near when I was born. It's during the Soviet time, so they exploded 2,000, equal to 2,000 Hiroshima bombs, so the same amount. So do you think that it's a promising idea, kind of, too?
Perhaps I think when we say circular bioeconomy, every place is possible, but of course that will require some more studies and more on the site because reclamation or eco-restoration takes time and it is very local specific, whether it's a chemical degradation or normal degradation because of drought or overgrazing or over-agriculture. But also, of course, you are talking about the nuclear polygon. I think Michael can add further on that, but I think in my view that will require some more studies and understanding of how carbon farming practices can work in those areas.
Yeah, well, for sure, both of those two examples which you mentioned, in principle, they are all solvable in a way, in the sense that there is even the possibility with large-scale restoration from Uzbekistan all the way to the RLC to bring the RLC back again. This is, there's no miracle about this. Just we humans need to decide that we want this and really make this a national priority. And this is something I think would be a great project to attack. I think it would also. It's probably even a national necessity to be proud of your own country that you solved such a big problem. At least I would be challenged if I were a citizen of this country to actually try to solve this problem. I think, as you said, it's one of the most known ecological disasters on Earth. And it would be a tragedy if we just accept it as it is. I think that's something that those two countries really should solve together. The other thing is Semipalatinsk. I think this is equally a necessity to bring kind of ecological restoration to the area, not only because air pollution, that the sand gets transported and so forth, to really keep some of the pollution in the ground, but really try to undo some of the historical sins, so to say, which we committed, and really put this into an ecological restoration. So this would definitely also be a project which is in a national interest, but would also attract interest from international participation to help restore the area. Absolutely.
Yeah, this area is a global hotspot for ecological restoration. In fact, I believe, and my colleagues also, that carbon farming is a huge opportunity for Kazakhstan, not for the national interest, but also to showcase its leadership at the regional level and making more like a regional biocarbon grid and including eco-restoration in entire area.
Okay, because what I'm thinking that not only to promote the idea of carbon farming in the sphere of the government policy, state policy, but also kind of to encourage farmers, entrepreneurs also to move towards this direction and maybe to find them kind of the space what they could do.
And I'm
simultaneously
sure
with
I'm sure it will attract a lot of international cooperation also, because I feel this will be interest not only for the region, for the world, to rehabilitate that area what you mentioned up to RLC in the entire area, what's called that polygon that can become a biocarbon polygon in the future.
Thanks a lot that you are bringing this brilliant new paradigm to Kazakhstan.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for the discussion.